These 7 men together form the nucleus of power in contemporary China. They occupy the loftiest positions within the ruling Communist Party, and every half-decade their identities and ranking order are unveiled during a precisely choreographed political spectacle known as the National Congress, an event designed to project unity and control to both domestic audiences and the wider world. China's Communist Party has presented its new leadership for the next 5-year term, proclaimed state broadcasters as cameras rolled. The sequence in which each official strides onto the crimson-carpeted stage carries heavy symbolism. The first to emerge automatically becomes the party's paramount leader for the ensuing 5 years. At the most recent Congress, held in Beijing in October 2022, that foremost position again belonged to Xi Jinping, China's head of state for the previous decade, who secured an unprecedented third debut after orchestrating the removal of the constitutional 2-term presidential ceiling that had constrained all earlier leaders. The move signaled his intent to maintain a tight grip on authority for the foreseeable future, perhaps for life. No leader has enjoyed such sweeping dominance since Mao Zedong, the revolutionary founder of the People's Republic, whose brutal campaigns scarred Chinese society for generations. Commentators regularly compare Xi to Mao, and Xi demonstrably borrows from Mao's political playbook of ideological drives, personality cult building, and rigorous party discipline. Yet a far more personal thread connects the two men. Mao catastrophically upended Xi's early life. Despite the decades separating them, their trajectories intersected in the most unexpected manner. As a teenager during Mao's Cultural Revolution, Xi, scion of a privileged Beijing household, was branded the son of a capitalist roader, publicly humiliated, and shipped off to a poor Shanxi village, where he lived in a cave house and was consigned to grueling farm work. 50 years later, that same individual stands among the globe's most formidable politicians, the sole Chinese leader since Mao to wield virtually unchecked power. How did a boy exiled within his own nation come to command it outright? Xi's entanglement with Mao traces back long before his birth. Dark, reflective underscore. The narrative begins amid the ferocious Chinese Civil War. A faction of radical communist insurgents, Mao among them, had carved out pockets of mainland territory and led a fighting force called the Red Army against the nationalist government of the Republic of China. At that moment, the communists were in dire straits. Most of their troops were hemmed inside a Mao-established enclave, ringed by nationalist soldiers, their food stores dwindling fast. Facing annihilation, Red Army strategists launched an audacious breakout to rescue roughly 130,000 troops and civilians. On the 16th of October, 1934, they blasted through a weak point in the encirclement and fled. The escape exacted a savage toll. Thousands were killed in battle. Thousands more deserted into the countryside, yet about 86,000 pressed onward. Their flight, destined to be christened the Long March, became a year-long odyssey to locate a new revolutionary base far from nationalist reach. Mao, once a prominent field commander, had been stripped of authority because his guerrilla methods had fallen from favor. The Long March reversed that humiliation. As the columns trudged forward, conventional battles ordered by the current leadership proved disastrous. Fewer than half the fugitives survived the initial 3 months. At the first major halt, influential cadre Zhou Enlai convened a conference and handed battlefield command back to Mao. Mao chose a destination nearly 800 miles to the north in the barren hills of Shanxi, but plotted a circuitous route that wound through high mountain passes and swamps zones he believed would contain fewer nationalist blockers. He was correct, yet hardship remained extreme. Icy rivers, snow-covered peaks, and relentless ambushes claimed countless lives. For 9 additional months, the weary columns marched, fought, and endured across several thousand miles before reaching northern Shanxi, where a guerrilla sanctuary overseen by communist veteran Xi Jinping, father of the future president, took the exhausted marchers in, provided rice and shelter, and gave them breathing room to regroup, forging an unexpected link between the families. By the end, fewer than 8,000 of the original marchers remained alive. Nevertheless, Mao's leadership was hailed as the factor that saved the revolution from utter destruction. He emerged as the party's de facto commander-in-chief and head of its armed forces, responsible for reconstructing the army that would eventually defeat the nationalists. Wherever and however the Red troops advance, they carry aloft the banner and glory of Chairman Mao Zedong. Intoned propaganda films of the era, this juncture offers a useful pause to outline the Communist Party's intricate hierarchy. Formally, supreme authority sits with the Central Committee, a body of hundreds that ratifies major policies. Nested within it is the Political Bureau, or Politburo, composed of a few dozen senior officials. In most communist systems, the Politburo is the real center of power below the General Secretary. China, however, adds an even tighter core. The Politburo Standing Committee, an elite subset, historically 5 to 9 men, that dominates the Central Military Commission that runs China's vast armed forces. Mao's elevation during the Long March vaulted him to this summit as both military chief and standing committee member. Although regarded informally as the party's supreme leader after 1935, he officially took the title in 1943. Holding sway over both party bureaucracy and army, Mao methodically reshaped institutions to guarantee lifelong supremacy. At his first National Congress as formal chief in April 1945, delegates adopted a landmark resolution that magnified his dominance. They decreed that the party must sustain a single unified interpretation of its history and enshrine Mao's ideological framework, later christened Mao Zedong thought, as its unquestionable guiding doctrine. From that moment, Mao's directives were effectively immune to open challenge. During that same Congress, Mao unveiled an inner leadership circle equivalent to today's standing committee. 4 veteran Long March comrades, Zhu De, Liu Shaoqi, Zhou Enlai, and Ren Bishi, each deeply loyal to him. 2 of them, Liu and Zhou, would become pillars of the future government, holding posts such as president, premier, and foreign minister. 4 years later, on the 1st of October 1949, Mao mounted Tiananmen Gate, declared complete communist victory in the decades-long civil war, and proclaimed the birth of a new nation, the People's Republic of China. Yet in reading this history, we must also recognize how fragile concentrated authority can be. The same mechanisms that elevated Mao to supreme command later spawned disasters such as the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution, when dissent was silenced. Commentators now fear that Xi's tightening grip may create comparable blind spots. Whether the current leader repeats old errors or guides China safely through 21st century turbulence will hinge on his readiness to tolerate scrutiny, open debate, real counterweights, ongoing oversight, and the humility to reverse course when facts shift, from party ranks and society at large combined. Lessons from the Long March remind us that adaptability, not presumed infallibility, secures enduring legitimacy. Mao Zedong began his career as a modest party worker, but he eventually rose to dominate Eastern Asia as the undisputed leader of Communist China. However, achieving revolutionary victory is vastly different from governing a nation. Once in charge, the Communist Party faced the challenge of managing everyday administrative tasks like delivering mail and building infrastructure such as dams. It became evident that the party couldn't handle all aspects of governance by itself. As a solution, a formal government was established to implement the major policy decisions made by the Politburo Standing Committee. This division of responsibilities evolved into a system where the party retained supreme decision-making authority, especially through the Politburo Standing Committee, while the State Council served as the highest body of the state apparatus led by the Premier of China, who is typically also a member of the Standing Committee. Mao maintained strict control over both the party and government by promoting individuals who were loyal to him, regardless of their administrative experience. This loyalty-first approach ensured that no one could challenge him, though it came at the cost of competent governance. One prominent example was Zhou Enlai, a key figure in Mao's rise to power during the Long March, who was appointed China's first premier. Many survivors of the Long March, including Xi Jinping's father, were rewarded with high-ranking posts. Xi's father became Secretary General of the State Council, and because of his lineage, young Xi gained the informal but significant title of princeling. Throughout his life, Mao never relinquished power, and the consequences were catastrophic. His unchecked leadership led to disastrous policies that triggered massive famines, political purges, and severe social upheaval, resulting in the deaths of 40 to 80 million people over several decades. The Cultural Revolution was the final, violent episode in Mao's quest to secure loyalty and perpetuate his ideology. Inspired by his admiration for communist icons like Lenin and Marx, Mao aimed to make his own ideology immortal. Those who deviated from Maoist doctrine were often publicly shamed, socially ostracized, or even executed, either by the military or by fervent young enforcers known as the Red Guards. Even those close to Mao were not spared. High-ranking officials, Long March veterans, and even members of the Politburo's Standing Committee were purged. Liu Shaoqi, a key party figure, was branded a traitor and died under brutal imprisonment. The army's chief of staff was removed and replaced by a Mao loyalist, eliminating dissent within the military. Mao's hand-picked successor died mysteriously in a plane crash while allegedly fleeing to the Soviet Union and was posthumously labeled a traitor. Xi Jinping's father suffered a similar fate, as he was publicly attacked by Red Guards and then imprisoned for 8 years during the Cultural Revolution. As a result, Xi Jinping, then only 15 years old, was expelled from his elite Beijing school and sent to perform arduous manual labor in the countryside, living in a cave and subsisting on meager rations. All of this hardship stemmed from Mao's political crusades. But after Mao's death in 1976, the Cultural Revolution came to an end. Deng Xiaoping, a fellow Long March veteran and previously ousted member of the Politburo Standing Committee, emerged as Mao's successor. In his final days, Mao had already lost much of his authority, allowing Deng to signal to other sidelined veterans that he intended to bring them back into the fold. Once Mao was gone, Deng was reinstated and in turn began restoring others who had been purged. With experienced leadership returning, the party focused on preventing a repeat of Mao's cult-like rule. In 1981, the party issued its second historical resolution, formally criticizing key parts of Mao's tenure while committing to collective leadership and opposing the concentration of power in a single person. Deng himself embodied this new model. While he retained control over the Central Military Commission and had significant influence in the government, he never assumed the roles of head of state or party chief. Instead, he chaired a new advisory body that allowed him to guide party strategy from behind the scenes.